And if you're interested in what he has to say, which I'm sure you will be, stay tuned because we'll have another seminar in October building off of the budgeting basics. So Mike's been very generous to give us time to be here today. He's the Director of Financial Planning here at Drexel. He has a lot of experience giving financial advice to alumni, College of Medicine students, and so today he's going to lend his expertise to us. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm going to go over a couple items, give a quick introduction of myself, obviously the reasons why to budget, how to create a budget, and then a few resources at the end. There was a little one-page handout, it's just a sample budget. You don't have to use it by any means, but it gives you the framework to say, oh yeah, I need to start thinking about these different categories. Now, as you mentioned, I'm the Director of Financial Planning specifically at the College of Medicine. I am a certified financial planner as well as a chartered life underwriter. I had a whole career prior to coming to Drexel. There's pretty much nothing in the financial services industry I haven't seen, sold, or experienced, but I'm not selling anything. I do not have any private clients anymore. My client base is essentially the College of Medicine and all alumni from DuComp. Let's see, so if you want to ask yourself, am I living paycheck to paycheck? And I'm going to really assume everyone here is broke for that point. Anyone here married? Anyone with kids? Just want to get a sense of that. Any of these questions. Does your money run out before your bills are paid? Are you financially vulnerable? Are we paying late fees on things? Credit cards, overdraft fees on your bank accounts, things like that, where you would actually notice a financial struggle. Are you putting off a financial decision, specifically healthcare related, because of financial situations? Again, for those that are married, do you and your spouse differ on priorities and how to spend and who spends and things like that? Do you want to save more but you find it impossible? Now, a lot of this talk is geared for people with income, people that are working and so forth. We really can't do much on the income side, but what you have control over is the expense side. So if your answer is yes to any of those earlier questions, we could take the risky approach, which is a little bit of a gamble. Maybe playing the credit card scenario a little bit more, playing the lottery, and the hopes for that home run in that regard. Or the safer approach, the more disciplined approach, is really looking at what you're spending, deciding, prioritizing around that, what's affordable and what's not, and putting it into a decision framework, essentially. Now, everyone has a different idea of really what a budget is. It should be considered really a snapshot of your personal situation, what's coming in and what's going out. It could be a plan for expenses that you're going to have in the future, things that you're planning to spend money on at some point. And believe it or not, it's actually the first step in a comprehensive financial plan. As a financial planner with all my clients in my background, I used to make them do a financial budget. They hated it just as much as you're going to hate it. But really, I needed to see their information. And until they wrote it down, they didn't know their own information. Generally, everybody knows what they make. No one knows what they spend. So until you actually start writing some stuff down, you're going to find your own surprises, essentially. Now, the benefits of budgeting generally are to reduce financial anxiety. If we're stressed out financially, you start to put a budget together, you start to see the numbers yourself. It's to reduce that stress. It actually gives you some control. If you start to see your own numbers, you're going to be more self-conscious on the spending. You're going to actually prioritize based on that, so it actually brings that control back to you. Now, long term, it helps you build up your assets, which hopefully improves your quality of life going forward. Now, it is a balancing act for the most part. I always put this equation up there. I used to do this with my clients as well. Income greater than expenses or expenses less than income. They say roughly the same thing, but believe it or not, successes come from the formula on the right, living within your means. Again, my audience generally are physicians, and there's a trap that physicians fall into. Their income rises, their lifestyle rises. Then what happens when they retire? The income's gone, but they're trying to maintain this lifestyle. So you want to live within your means. From a practical standpoint, I had more millionaire retired school teachers than physicians, because that school teacher lived on this budget their entire career. And then in retirement, it's extremely easy to maintain that. The physician, more high net worth, they were living on this budget, and it's very hard to maintain that. So again, it's living within your means. So where do we start? Data gathering. Again, this is the boring topic. It's the most onerous and so forth. If you have a paycheck, look at the actual pay stub. Every time I ask people what they make, they tell me their net number. Oh, I get, $2,000 a month. Really? You're probably paid $2,600 a month. So let's look on that pay stub. You'll see all the taxes and everything like that on there. Look at your checkbooks. For those of you that balance a checkbook and actually write down your transactions. It's very hard in a debit card society. Credit cards. My wife and I, you put every single expense onto a credit card, and then we pay it every month like you're supposed to. But if I ever need anything, that is a huge depository of information. I can go back to that credit card statement, I can see the summary at the end of the year and see exactly what categories and so forth. So depending on if you're a cash payer, or you're a debit card person, or you're a check payer, or you're a debit card or credit card person, let's look at the data that you already have. Now, again, the exercise is going to be on paper or pencil. There are apps for this and everything like that, but generally you need to collect your data. Now, there's two sides of the coin. We got the income side with the expense side. You might say, well, I have a job, so there's a certain amount of income, or maybe we don't have a job. How are we financing things? It could be from student loans, it could be from other areas, it could be grants, scholarships, work study, family support, things like that. So there is something coming in. You may or may not see it, but there is something coming in. And then the other side is really, where's it going? It could be going to the university, could be going to a landlord, could be going to Target or Amazon or something like that. Is it coming out of your bank account through ATM withdrawals? Is it checks you're written, auto pay, direct deposit, direct debit, whatever? You've got sources coming in and you've got various exits out the door. Now you can start to think of your expenses in very broad categories. Things like housing, food, car costs, transportation related, things like that, insurances, or other healthcare. We put that under a category. Then we have the shopping. Could be clothing related, could be school supply, work supply, whatever, things you need. Or it could be entertainment. Now we can also fine tune it. Housing could be specifically rent, as well as all the utilities associated with that. Just yell out, what are some things that you consider a utility? Cell phone, what was it? There's definitely, you got gas, water, heat, electric, trash, cell phone, Netflix, data plan, cable. Those are subscriptions, yes, but it's a utility. It does vary a little bit, but it goes beyond the things you think of around the house, just the gas, water, heat, electric. But again, start thinking of other subscriptions as utilities as well. Food could be groceries, where we're shopping and cooking, could be eat out, take out, delivery, could be Wawa, could be Trader Joe's. Car costs, well, maybe we don't have that car, so then throw Uber in there. Maybe we do have that car, we got to throw gas, maintenance, and insurance in there. Health related, could be your health insurance premiums, it could be that prescriptions, deductibles, everything's health related. Now when we look at the shopping, we could put it in the categories of, is it clothing, is it furniture, is it durable, non-durable, whatever. Or we could look, is it in a physical store, is it online, is it delivery, things like that. Entertainment, everything. Could be that vacation, could be bars, could be eating out, could be movies, could be books, online, whatever. So we can be as specific as you want. You can get as granular as you want. If you take the first step and start to organize, you're well ahead of the game. You could take it as fine, down this rabbit hole as we want. I did hand out that little worksheet. It's scary looking. I don't expect you to fill in every item on there. It's really just to jog your memory and sort of think, I can think of things in these different categories. Expenses, generally the whole world works on a monthly basis. Your rent's monthly, your car payment's monthly. Could be a semi-annual auto insurance bill, break it down to monthly. Your paycheck could be bi-weekly, think of it on a monthly standpoint. So think of your income monthly, think of your expenses monthly. Now there's a concept of, is it a fixed expense or is it variable? Your rent is your rent. That's a known number. Cell phone might be a known number, unless we're into overages and things like that. Insurances, like I said, it could be an annual number, could be a semi-annual number. They tend to be fairly known. Variable, it's a bill you knew you were going to have, such as food, but it could fluctuate month to month. Credit card charges, if we have a balance and we're trying to make payments on it, are we paying just 1%? Are we paying the minimum? Are we paying over the minimum? So it's a bill you know you have, but the amount you're sending every month or incur every month might fluctuate. So you can look at it as fixed or variable. I just want you looking, put it that way. If we start looking, you're ahead of the game. So we've now gathered the information, whether it's the income side or the expense side. You want to assign the expenses to specific categories. Again, very broad's fine. You don't have to get too fine. And then ultimately you want to evaluate where you are. You have probably a conception as to, oh, I think I don't spend as much as I make. There might be those end of semester things, could be an airline flight, something that puts you over in any one month. But again, what do the numbers look like? Now, I'm not sure if you can see this or not. I gave this type of a talk, this is probably about 6 years ago. Yep.
There's a question.
Oh, there we go, on the left side, there.
All these, categorizations and paper pencil, do you have electronic versions, or is there a online software that you would recommend?
Very good question. I don't really have a recommendation. It's really whatever you're comfortable with. It could be paper and pencil. It could be a long legal light tablet. It could be an Excel spreadsheet. It could be an app, and I'm going to show some apps at the end. Whatever works for you, quite honestly. Before apps came out, there was software like Microsoft Money and Quicken, very labor intensive. And as a result, people stopped entering their data routinely, and then they got behind. Again, the first step is just collecting the information and breaking it down. If you're comfortable with pen and paper, perfect. I keep everything on Excel for myself. The apps, just like Mint, people swear by it. I'm not a big Mint user, but I'm going to list a couple of the computer resources at the end. Now, like I was saying, for this is students' real numbers. This was a grad student. I gave a talk on a Friday. She came to see me on a Monday with her own numbers. You do not have to put it together in a pie chart like she did. But until she looked at her own numbers, she knew how much her rent and what she was putting in for utilities, the car, insurance, health insurance, cell phone, people don't really think about. She put groceries into Acme and a Target. Other food, don't know really what that was. Could be the eat out, take out type. Transportation, even though she has a car, and then miscellaneous, she came up with a number versus what she thought she was spending. Until she actually looked back at her real numbers and realized that, wow, she's not only $400 some over what she thought she was, came to the realization that that was unsustainable for her situation. So again, the first step was just gathering the data and seeing really where you are at this point. Doesn't mean we end here, but you're going to be very, very aware once you do this type of an exercise. Now, I don't know that we can increase our income. We're in a fixed income scenario. You could work twice as hard. That's not necessarily going to change your income situation. So we can't really do much on that side of the equation. So it's really, let's look at the expense side. Where do we have some ability to control? So we look to cut out, or what I say, don't incur the avoidable type of expenses. Early on, when I asked about is anyone hitting late fees, if we're routinely having late fees on a specific account or subscription or bank account or something like that, how can we avoid incurring those in the future? How can we correct that problem? Then we look at what are those variable expenses. Is there any way to reduce them? The things that are coming in a little bit higher than what we anticipate. Once we know what our expenses are, then we can zero in. Is it a specific store that we shop at? When you go listing that grocery, and I always use this as an example, Target has groceries. If you ever go there to shop for groceries, chances are you're coming out with more than just groceries. So sometimes it's just, let's change our habit from the store we shop at. You go shop at Acme, you're only coming out with groceries. You're not coming out with clothes or things of that nature. So how can we change or reduce those variable expenses? And then going forward, how can we make adjustments to those fixed expenses? If we have a car loan, that loan will eventually be paid off. If we have a car lease, we're always going to have that payment. If our rent's just a little bit too high, there's nothing you can do about it today, but when that lease comes up, where can we, make an adjustment there? So the fixed expenses may take time to make adjustments to. Okay, so how can we cut or, reduce the avoidable expenses? The services we don't necessarily need. Cable tends to be the big one. If we're paying for credit monitoring service, if we've had, a data issue in the past, maybe we need that credit monitoring service, but is a subscription that we're paying for? If you start to look at your bills, you might see a bill that shows up every single month. Say, oh, did I really need that? Is there a cheaper version of that? Again, the late fees, bank charges, if we're paying a low balance fee on things, how can we avoid that? If we're paying an annual fee on a credit card, how can we get that changed? If we have a credit card balance right now and we're being charged interest month over month, the first thing I tell people to do, and everyone's like, oh, I didn't know you could do that. Let's say you're being charged, let's say 18% interest on your credit card, and you're paying the bills, you haven't been late, so you're not a bad customer at all, and you've had that card open for a couple years. When you call, the person who picks up the phone has a little bit of discretion. You could say to them, what are you currently charging me? Get them to tell you. They really don't like to admit that they're charging you 18%, 22%, things like that. So get them to verbally tell you, oh yeah, we're charging you 18.6%. Say, is there anything you can do about that? The person who answers the phone has all your information in front of you. They can say, oh yeah, this person's been with us for 5 years. This person pays their bill month in and month out, and they use our card. Sure, ma'am, sir, I can take that down to 13%. So they're not going to reduce it down to like the 7. But that is just, how hard was that? Just to call and ask. Because they know if you're calling to ask and they tell you what the rate is, you might change cards. And now they've lost a good customer. Now granted, if you're missing payments or something like that, then you're not necessarily a good customer. They won't move it. Things like that. So if we're paying charges for anything, any type of financial account, we have to really nip that in the bud. Okay, so those variable expenses. Obviously you want to shop sales. Have a list every time you go to a store. You go in, you go out. No wandering. Is there ability, are we commuting? Is there a cheaper way? Can we ride share? Things of that nature. Learn how to cook, if we don't already. Make it a routine, whether it's specifically a shopping day or specifically a cooking day. It beats, buying lunch. Definitely attend every free pizza you can get. But again, it's the cooking. That tends to be one of the largest categories is food on everyone's budget. Now, the turn down the thermostat, it's more the turn off the lights. What of those utility bills can be trimmed? We're leaving that light on, or we're leaving that computer on, or we're leaving that TV on, or things like that. Are we running the air conditioning too much when we're out, especially this week? Now, the one about learning basic home repair, the point I want to get across is don't pay for things you could do yourself. I don't know how to sew a button onto my shirt or anything like that, but if there's stuff that breaks around the house, I'm going to give it a shot first, if I feel comfortable with it. Not saying you have to go become a plumber or anything like that, but again, over time, try not to pay people for things that you could do yourself. YouTube is an extremely valuable resource for anyone that does home repairs. If you want to see how things can get done, just YouTube it and you'll see. I've replaced the soap dispenser in our dishwasher 3 times. I replaced the ice machine in the refrigerator. I've replaced every lamp or bulb on our car. Things that you would normally say, oh, that's broken, I got to get repaired or whatever. You might be surprised you might be able to do it yourself. Okay, the little tweaks. I mentioned this example earlier. I tend to get all my movies at the library rather than have a subscription service or anything like that. There's thousands of titles that I've never seen. So the library is one of the largest resources that people underutilize. The example came up earlier regarding downloading books and things like that. And I pointed out that you all have a Philadelphia address, which means you're eligible for a Philadelphia library card, which means you have access to the entire Free Library of Philadelphia's audiobooks for free. Have a list when you're shopping, and believe it or not, coupons. I'm going to put my kids through college based on using coupons for the past 30 years. There is a lot of value in that. It's the only reason why we have a Philadelphia Inquirer subscription is to get the coupons, quite honestly. Cable or just that premium channel. You know, could we reduce that? I'm not saying steal your neighbor's cable, but that tends to be a big cost. You see those 2 Comcast buildings? You're paying for those. Now here, you know, just numbers. If we get into, you know, eating out every day or, you know, lunch or something like that, how does that add up? You know, 7 days a week or $7 a day, 5 days a week, $1,700 over the course of a year. Could we get that down to 3 days a week? Could we get down to 1 day a week? Fridays. You know, the numbers add up. Lunches in the cafeteria adds up. How do we get those fixed costs? You know, the biggest one's obviously housing. Roommate, no roommate. That's the biggest choice for a grad student. You know, the utility bills, you know, if we start to track them and see how much it is over months, if you look backwards, say, okay, how much do I typically pay in utilities? Is there a way that we can reduce that? If we have certain loans, like credit cards specifically, are there ways we can get to it cheaper? Insurance coverage, Geico's basically made a name for themselves. What's the quote? 15 minutes can save you 15% on auto insurance. There is a lot of validity to that. If you have a car, if you have an auto insurance policy, if you have State Farm, Allstate, I'm not knocking them. They're financially solid companies, but they are the premium companies. E-insurance is the discounted brand for, I think it's Allstate. Geico isn't always the cheapest. So what you do is you get out what's called the declaration page on your current insurance that has, you know, what's the tort limits, what's the VIN number, everything's on there, and then you call or online. I've got this VIN number, this is the level of coverage I'm looking for, get quote. Then you go to the next company, get a quote. Go to the next company, get a quote. Doesn't hurt your credit, it's not a credit report issue or anything like that. But if you're paying a lot for auto insurance, shop around. Okay, what are the near-term budget busters? You know, obviously coming in the fall for the first time as a student, all that upfront costs, whether it's technology related, whether it's a security deposit, furnishing an apartment for the first time, you know, coming from an undergrad standpoint. If we've racked up some credit card debt just to get here, we need to have a plan in place to get out from underneath that, you know, that transitional type of a cost. The ongoing budget busters, repeating courses, definitely want to avoid that. Pets. I'm not saying get rid of any pets, but no one factors in pet costs when they're looking at their budget. It's just an item that people just don't think about. So we've got to factor that in. Entertainment's that one category, it's very vague. Trips, you know, I see this with a lot of students, getting here in the, you know, beginning of the semester, going home over break or things like that. No one ever factors that into their budget. I've had students in the past tell me that they're sending money home to mom and dad. I'm like, well, that's your choice, but it puts a financial strain. It really does. So we got to see if that's your situation or not. Again, travel to and from home. I always put this on there. Boyfriends and girlfriends are expensive, especially if you're married, but no one factors that in. That, oh, they're coming to visit, I'm going to visit them. When they come to visit, we're going to go out and things like that. It wasn't a number that we had written down on that budget at the beginning of the month, but it's an occasion that money tends to get spent. So we put a little forethought into it and say, oh, we're going to take advantage of the free stuff. I'm not saying the library, but maybe the museum. Yeah. So weddings also are expensive, and I had this example when I asked a graduating med school student, say, what was an expense that you had that you didn't anticipate? Ladies. She said she was in 6 weddings as a bridesmaid during the 4 years of medical school. And that's very, very expensive. So choose your friends wisely. Now, the ultimate point is once we have the data, we've got to make the hard decisions. I'm not saying it's easy. It could be a discipline aspect. It could be a pattern. It could be a habit. For example, leaving a credit card at home. Therefore, when you find that, oh, that impulse buy, you can't do it. Or the debit card at home. Staying out of stores. You know, hanging out at the mall is not the right place to hang out. Habits and hobbies. What are those entertainment things or those little side diversions that we have? Entertainment is the area that people tend to focus on. If you do have types of debt, from car loans to credit card loans to multiple credit card balances or things like that, you do want to pay more than the minimum, or else we're just barely treading water at that point. You never want to skip a payment, because now we're starting to impact our credit score. That could impact some of our future decisions. Now, ultimately, you want to get to a point in your budget where you have the ability to save. We should think of it as an expense. We should think of it as a fixed expense, possibly, where we're automatically deducting something from checking and putting it into savings every month. We're building up that cash cushion. It's called paying yourself first. As an employee, for example, as a Drexel employee, I participate in the retirement plan here. Ultimately, you're going to move into your careers. You're going to have a retirement plan at your next employer. You're paying yourself. It comes out of your paycheck before you even see it and could spend it. You do need to build an emergency fund because stuff happens. And then you'd be surprised. If you actually set a goal, you're going to be much more in tune to try and achieve that goal. Right now, we might not have a goal in mind. So start thinking about what are those goals, both near-term and long-term financially. So the benefits of paying yourself first is you learn to manage your money better. You've lived on the residual if you've paid yourself first. Obviously, if you have a goal, a financial goal in mind, you're starting to build towards that, and ultimately improve your standard of living, so we're not living paycheck to paycheck. Most importantly, you have money available for emergencies. The number one reason why people go bankrupt, and I'm not saying you guys are going bankrupt, is because an event happened, a layoff or health-related, that reduced their income or the bills piled up. They didn't necessarily spend their way into bankruptcy. An event happened. We need to plan on emergencies. There's my car 2 months ago. I didn't tell that other car to move into my lane. So that's automatically a $500 deductible and the loss of use of that car for a couple weeks. Again, so you need to plan on emergencies. The budgeting tools, you'll hear about different, like the expense envelope system. I'm not going to go too much into these, but if you start to Google budgeting, this type of stuff comes up. The monthly payment schedule is simply taking out a calendar and writing on it when your known bills are due, when that credit card bill is due, when the rent is due, and things like that. So you can actually visualize in 1 month, oh, collectively I need like $1,200 or what, $1,800 to get through this month, but we need to write down when our payday is as well. So know, are we too tight in any 1 month? The daily spending diary, this is a lot of work, but it's a very eye-opening case where you would actually physically write down every single dime you spend within a period of time. If we wanted to track 1 month or 1 week or something like that, whether it's coffee, whether it's gum, whether it's gas for the car, whether it's we paid a certain bill or whatever, to actually write it all down as we're spending it. The expense envelope system, this is a very, very strict type of a way, is that you physically get out several envelopes and we write the category expense on that envelope and we put in our money for that expense for that month. If it's food, if it's rent, if it's utilities or whatever, you put in exactly, and you have to live on just those dollars. You will run out of run out of money before you run out of month. On some categories, you have to make it to the next month. It's a very strict budgeting system. It pays tremendous results. Think of it like a very strict diet. But I'm not promoting it. I'm just saying you're going to come across that when you start to Google, budgeting and so forth. Now, getting to your question about apps, Mint is one that a lot of students ask me about. I used to use Mint before it was an app. It's more data intensive. The benefit of it is it's going to electronically link. So all your debit card transactions and credit card transactions, it'll pull it in for you. Pocket Guard is one I came across recently. Looks pretty robust. And the Toshal Finance is also another one. You Need a Budget is specifically a budget type of a tool. A lot of good reviews online for that one. Like I said, I personally don't use any apps or anything like that, so I can't rate them by any means. The Quicken, Microsoft Money are the older software versions. very labor intensive. But I think the apps have improved on that because they're importing the data electronically. If you ever look on your credit card statement, whether it's monthly or maybe at the end of the year, they might give you a summary page that you spent this much on transportation, you spent this much on food, supplies, and you always have to wonder, well, how did they know that was transportation? You know, the algorithms are pretty good. But if we want to go by, you know, those categories, fine. Makes your job a lot easier for you. Now, just as a recap, a lot of data gathering. You know, maybe not so much on the income side, but it's a lot of data gathering on the expense side. You want to review the information that you come up with. Were they fixed? Were they variable? Was it discretionary? Was it a necessity? Was it a luxury? You know, is it monthly or semi-annually? We had to break it down to monthly. So you can look at it a lot of different ways. Obviously, you're going to try and trim wherever it's possible. You want to align your income with your expenses, getting back to the timing. You know, when are those bills due? When are you paid? You do want to look a little bit into the future. What are we doing this winter break? What are we doing at the end of this semester or next summer? Is there something that we know or can anticipate that we need to start accommodating now? Let's see. Do you want to put some type of savings? You know, the banks make it very easy. On the 15th of the month, I have $300 go from my checking account to my savings account. I'd set that up probably 18 years ago. I know it's the 15th of the month. Now, granted, I'll spend from savings when I need to, but it's just something that was habit. You know, I started it, a long time ago. This is not static. Just because we came up with those numbers, we got to our net number, you do need to revisit it. Maybe not every month, but maybe quarterly, something like that. Once you do this exercise once, you're going to be more self-aware. You know, you're just going to naturally spend less, or you're going to slowly change your habits. You don't necessarily need to carry it around with you every day. And definitely, this is not a beat yourself up. I don't mean this, I'm not trying to guilt trip anybody, but your numbers are your numbers. I always get the question, well, how much should we be spending on X? How much should we, what percentage of our income and so forth? When you're in a very tight budget, I don't want to live with that type of rigidity. Again, I work exclusively with physicians, and they always want to, what's the rule of thumb? 6 months living expense. But 6 months living expense as a physician, that's a lot of money, way more than they need. 6 months living expense as a medical resident, they can't even afford that. So I don't want to use a rule of thumb that I know they shouldn't either adhere to or can't live within. But right now, in your limited income range, I don't want to put a percentage on something like the housing category versus the food category. I'd rather know that, are we living within our means? Is our credit card balance going down or is it going up? That's where the real proof there, so to speak. Questions? Anything else that you wanted to cover with budgeting? Like I said, it's a very dry topic. My clients hated it, but I made them do it. And they had to pay me for them to do it. Thoughts, observations? Yes.
You mentioned that some of the apps link to your bank accounts. Mm-hmm. Do you know anything about the security of those apps?
I know nothing about the security of those apps. I take it for granted, unfortunately. It's a big industry. It really is. So I kind of take it for granted that someone else is thinking about the security on them, but I can't vouch for it. So, that's a very excellent question.
There are quite a few websites out there who do things like that, who pull your financial data from where you can link bank accounts and credit cards and everything. And if you compare, they all have security statements because obviously, it's in the media every day. So people have become more conscious. So they have statements about what kind of security they have, how separate individual data, personal data is from just numbers. On their websites, and I suggest comparing them, and I'm sure there is some kind of rating or some kind of commentary on the website, blogs that talk about things like that as well.
It also depends on the app. For example, Mint, it transfers the data in, but it has no access to do something with your account. So they normally tout that as a good thing. If someone even gets into Mint, they can't access your accounts. They must know what's in your account. Others, on the other hand, you can literally pay bills or do transactions from it, so that's a little bit trickier. those normally they have whatever encryption and they've never been breached. So all of that is we have to do the research.
Look at your bank account now, your checking account, whether it's a credit union, whether it's a Bank of America, Wells Fargo, or something smaller. They've all tried to roll out budgeting tools on their websites that they might start categorizing, especially if you're a debit card, there's a lot of transactions. They might already be able to, when you log into your account, see it. Not that you personally set it up, but they might have already summarized your own data for you. If you have multiple bank accounts, obviously you've got to do some bit of aggregation, but use the vendors you're already, if you already have a credit card, whether it's Capital One, Discover, something like that, I'm sure they're already summarizing stuff for you. So you don't necessarily need to reinvent or go get something new when you might already have the tools available to you. Yep.
How do you decide, so let's say I have $300 that I've managed to budget well, I have 300 excess. How much of that do I tell to go, all right, so this goes into savings versus this goes to paying off loan? How do you make a decision on how much should go to what?
If we had no savings, I would want you to at least have something before we start paying down debt beyond the minimum payments. I use that example of the car, as an emergency. If we already have a little bit of savings and our only financial goal is to be debt-free, then we would prioritize it towards that. Do look ahead. I wasn't kidding about what are we doing this Christmas break? What are we doing next summer? Is there an anticipated expense that we're going to have? Rather than get to that point and decide how to pay for it, let's set aside the money up front. But it's a very valid question as far as I've got debt and I've got other goals. Most students always hit me with, I want to be debt-free. Great. But I'm always pointing out, what other goals do we have? Is it a near-term goal, whether it's down payment for a house? Is it a trip? Is it a wedding we're trying to pay off? Is it something like that? Then we need to prioritize the nearer-term goals. Still have a plan to be debt-free. Stick to that plan. But I want people to accomplish multiple goals at the same time. But it's a very valid question.
You go first, you had your arm up there.
If you have, say you have multiple sources of debt, it could be a loan, it could be a credit card or something like that. Do you have a pecking order or a recommendation? Because I read, in some like various articles and things, people say go with the least, that has the least amount of money first.
Yep.
So then it's like you can kind of trickle into something like
Yep.
that. Do you have
Very valid question. Let's say we have multiple loans at different interest rates, different balances. Mathematically, money towards the highest interest rate will, paying that loan down first, fastest, will save you the most amount of money. The reason why people say, pay off the one with the lowest balance, you'll hear them call it the waterfall effect or snowball effect or something to that extent. It's more psychological. It's kind of the little victory. If we had a $500 balance and a $1,500 balance and a $32,000 or $7,000 balance, if we pay off the $500 one, yay, you pat yourself on the back. It gives you the confidence to keep going. I've worked with a lot of creditor issues, and it's all about sticking to the plan and those little victories so far. That's the rationale behind the paying off the smallest balance first. It's more the psychological side. Also, if you're making payments on all three loans, and we pay off that lowest balance one first, that monthly payment that we were already accustomed to, you now add that to a payment on the next higher. So you're able to snowball and get larger payments towards the higher balances. But mathematically, it's always the highest interest rate one should be the first. All the other reasons are non-math based. Think of it that way. Yep.
Could you say a little bit about building your credit score? You had mentioned earlier that if the company is not willing to reduce your interest
The interest,
rate,
yeah.
then you could switch. But on the other hand, if you get a new credit card, that could also have an impact on your. That can have an impact on your credit score, and if you close the other one, that has an impact as well.
Correct. And actually one of our next talks, the one in October, we're going to go into more depth on credit-related issues. But to your point, the stuff that you brought up, your credit score reflects a lot of factors. The most important one is you paying on time. That's the largest weighted factor. The other factors are utilization, how much of your current credit line is being utilized, and Opening a new card is a brand-new credit line. So now we have twice as much credit. But it was a hard inquiry. The newer credit card company had to actually look at your credit report. So by inquiring about your credit and establishing a new line of credit, it actually brings your score down. But the fact that you now have more credit brings it up. So there are multiple factors working in different. Now, the ultimate question is, do we care about our credit score? Yes, we do. But maybe not every single day of the year do we care about it. So if it puts us into a better place, getting to a cheaper card, cheaper interest rate, or a better line of credit, or a no-fee card versus a fee card, you will not care that your credit score dropped temporarily and then will work its way back up as you're making your payments on time. Why use that blunt of a phrase? Do we care? Are we in the market for a new loan, a new car, a new house? Then we do care what our score is when we're applying for that. But if you already own a car and you already own a house, I don't care what my credit score is. I'm not looking for a new loan. So I'll close old accounts, or I'll do these little temporary things that put me in a better footing, not caring that my score fluctuated and so forth. Auto insurance companies like Geico and Progressive will use your credit score when issuing you auto insurance, but they won't turn you down later on simply because your score fluctuated. So there are some things that there's a pricing based on your credit score. So at the end of the day, if we're putting ourselves into a better position, we actually don't care that new inquiry on our credit report dropped it or something like that. To your other point, one of the factors is length of history. As soon as you open a credit card and the older you get, your credit history gets older and older. If we close that old card because there was fees, we don't need it anymore, now our credit history just shrunk to the shorter, not as long. So our credit score will drop. But at the end of the day, we're in a better position. We've closed the card we don't need, and we're into the cards that are better for us. So again, your score will fluctuate, but people they think the credit card's more important than it really is, the credit score. So they tend to let that factor deter them from doing what's right. If we're in the market for a house, we do need to maintain a higher credit score, and because we need to get approved for that loan. But if we can do some interim steps, then it's worth it to let the score fluctuate, and it'll eventually come back up. Think of it that way. Yep.
I have a question about insurance which covers damages, like renter's insurance. So it's not a mandatory thing for anybody, but how do we approach it? Because if it's a renter's insurance I take today, I probably have to pay $15 or $20 per month, and I probably will not have any theft or anything in the next 2 years, but I will end up paying a lot of money without reason, just to have a psychological risk safety. So
Yep.
how do I?
It is. We got to protect ourselves from an unknown. It could be a health-related unknown, which is why we have health insurance. It could be an auto-related unknown, where you need the auto insurance, the renter's insurance to protect you from theft or contents replacement, things like that. I've heard that landlords require it in some cases. It's unavoidable. It tends to be affordable, like in that $15 range, something like that. If you already have auto insurance, you might get a bundled discount, through the same carrier. But if you don't have auto insurance and this is your only product, unfortunately, it's a necessary evil, especially if the landlord's requiring it. But it's to protect that risk. Insurers know how many in this room are going to get robbed. They know how many are going to die prematurely. They know how many accidents you're going to be in. They have hundreds of years worth of data. So they've priced it based on the fact, hoping that you never use it. So unfortunately, it's an expense that we try to shop around a little bit. You're not going to find a big difference, $12 versus $15. But auto insurance, where it could be $100 a year difference, something like that. But again, we're trying to protect risks. Yes.
I have a quick question about closing credit card accounts.
Mhm.
You had just mentioned this previously. One of the things that I read in the past, I don't know if this was just some pseudo-scientific literacy or whatever, but if the card doesn't have any sort of fees or anything like that, are you better off to zero out the balance and just hold on to the card and not do anything with the account?
Yes.
Because
For a couple of reasons.
total credit.
Exactly. Let's say you have two cards, each with a $2,000 credit limit on it. You've got $4,000 of credit. And card A, you happen to charge or have a balance of about $500. Again, a credit score is a snapshot in time. It's not that you're carrying $500 from month one to month two. It's just, hey, today there happens to be $500 of charges on there. Therefore, your utilization is roughly 1/4. You close card B because we're not using it or there's any other reason, your utilization just shot up to 50% because all you had left was the one card. That's where the score would drop. So to that point, maybe we leave card B open because that way we have total credit. And maybe card B was the older card. You know, it anchored our credit history started back then and it's gotten better over time. We close that card, all of a sudden our history shrunk, our utilization rises, the score drops, you know, so temporarily it's painful, you know, to your credit score. But ultimately, people aren't pickpocketing your wallet. They're hacking into the companies to you know, massive data breach type thing. So having as few cards open as possible would be ideal. We just have to go through that, you know, credit score fluctuation to get down to one card. If we close, you know, the second card maybe after we call the first card, say, hey, you're the card I'm using, can I have an increase in that limit? You know, so that therefore your total credit stays the same even after you close the second card. Yep.
How do student loans affect your credit score? Is it how much you owe in student loans or how you
There's
pay them?
very good question. There's different categories of credit. There's consumer revolving debt. That's your credit card. Your credit score is the most sensitive to that type of debt because it knows that's your best indicator of how reliable you are. You bought that TV, you paid for it. Or you bought that TV and you didn't pay for it. Car loans, mortgages, there's collateral. There's a car there, there's a real estate there. They know a person will pay their car loan before they'll pay their credit card bill because they don't want to lose their car. So the credit card is the most sensitive. Student loans are in a different category because it's the only form of debt where you're allowed to exceed the amount that you were lent. You had a $40,000 student loan, 2 years later, it's $43,000. So the credit scoring model knows that that debt can actually be higher than the amount that they originally lent you. You can't go higher on a car loan. You can't go higher on a mortgage loan. You can't really, they close the card if you try to go higher on a credit card. So student loans aren't weighted as heavily in that factor because they know people generally owe more on their student loans than they originally borrowed. Now, having said that, if you miss a payment on a student loan, it gets reported and that student loan could eventually go into collections and a default, then collections and all that sort of stuff, and it will wreck your credit. But just day in and day out, it really doesn't impact your credit score that much until you miss a payment. Then everything's off. Yep.
What are your thoughts on consolidating student loans after graduation?
It really does depend on your situation, your career path. The benefit to consolidation, and when I use the term consolidation, I'm talking about federal consolidation. A lot of private refinancing companies will call it a consolidation. So I don't want to mix up the two terms. The federal consolidation just simply simplifies your life. Gets multiple loans down to one federal loan. Your interest rate is a weighted average, so it's not a money-saving move. It may take an ineligible federal loan and make it eligible for certain federal benefits, like public service loan forgiveness or an income-based repayment plan, but it's not a money-saving move. Private refinancing, what they'll call consolidation, is you're paying off your federal loans and you're issued a brand new private loan subject to the terms and conditions of that private loan. Hopefully cheaper, maybe a longer payment period, which could keep your payment, more manageable. So there's really two reasons why you would do a private refinance: to get a lower interest rate or to get a lower monthly obligation from a budget standpoint. So really, it's a budget-driven decision. Could you handle a payment on the federal plans? The way the federal repayment plans are designed is you should always be able to afford a federal payment. Your income rises, your payment rises. Your income drops, your payment drops. Private loans, you're locked in. You have to pay it in 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, whatever. So if your budget can handle that payment schedule and it's a cheaper rate, go right ahead. If our career is more in academic, like a nonprofit or government employer, and you get your loans potentially forgiven under public service loan forgiveness, then don't refinance. Yeah, so it really depends on the career path and income considerations. Yep.
And did you can stay in school until your loans are forgiven?
I don't know that you can stay in school until your loans are forgiven. If you drop below a half-time status, the loans will enter repayment. don't quote me on what credit hours makes halftime or not, but with student loans, you could take a class a semester, but you're going to be in repayment. You know, you're going to have a payment obligation and so forth. How many degrees do you want? When you hear the tenure, when you hear the phrase that 10-year program, a lot of people are thinking of public service loan forgiveness, which is working for an employer that counts, and in repayment at the same time. Now, this wasn't really going to be a financial aid talk, because I know the financial aid department would have, you know, sessions specific to that, as to what payment plans make the most sense and things like that. Or maybe we make that a, you know, session number 4, I don't know. Any other questions on budgeting?
I have a comment.
I'll ask for any comments on budgeting.
About, you mentioned the little, the little expenses. There are a lot of things you don't really pay much attention to, and they're sort of hidden. For example, if you have a bank account and they charge you $250 a month for whatever checks you never use or something like that, or just for maintaining. But there are a lot of banks out there who don't.
Correct.
Then ATM fees. Banks, some banks, they don't have a lot of ATMs, but they refund every ATM fee you use. That's especially relevant up here, where you on campus have TD Bank ATMs that actually charge a fee rather than the PNC ones that we have down the main, in Center City. That's relevant. If you get cash twice a week and it costs you whatever $2 each time,
Yep.
that amounts to whatever you spend on.
Yeah, no, it was about the trimming, what I'll call the avoidable expenses. Early on I mentioned late fees. If you look and you're paying a late fee, or there's a low balance fee, or there's a per transaction fee, or there's a maintenance fee, it could be a credit card annual maintenance fee, it could be a low balance fee on the checking account, overdraft fees, if we're bouncing checks a little too much or something like that. The ATM fees are a big issue. How can we prevent those? Is you call the bank, you say, I'm getting hit with these late fees, and they might say, oh, we have a student account, or you have direct deposit, so you're eligible for this account. The banks have multiple types. I mean, it's one type of an account, but they have multiple levels of service. You might be paying for a level of service we don't necessarily need to maintain. I have direct deposit. I'm a PMC customer. I have direct deposit, so I get free checks. I get like unlimited ATM usages, and I really don't pay any fees simply because I had direct deposit on that account. I think they call it their workplace checking. Maybe we have to switch banks. We try to avoid it. So if anything, call the bank. Say, I'm paying these fees. Is there anything you can do about it? Oh, well, we see that you're in our silver account. Maybe, oh, you're a student? Oh, we can put you in the student saver account. Therefore, all fees are waived. The ATMs at Wawa's are always, I believe, transaction free. But if your bank's charging you to use the ATM at the Wawa, then we need to call the bank. But I put that in the avoidable type category.
Great. Do we have any final questions? No? Let's thank our speaker for giving us.
You're very welcome.
We have a lot of questions today about banking and credit and debt. And so if you would like to learn more, come back in October when we have our second financial literacy seminar. So stay tuned for that. Thanks, and take some pizza if you're still hungry.